Good afternoon. How are you? A couple of people asked me why I talk about Jefferson at the beginning of a walk and talk. So for those who haven't heard my reasoning, if that's appropriate way to describe it, it is that if you've ever been to Monticello, Jefferson's place atop the mountain, you'll notice that he, like Franklin and others in the period of the Enlightenment, did experiments, and on a daily basis Jefferson would keep track of the weather in a more elegant, sophisticated, and detailed way than I do. So as a homage to Jefferson's scientific ability, when I cite based on whatever information I have about the weather, I refer to Thomas Jefferson as a Thomas Jefferson period of my walk and talk. I know that went longer than I planned, but anyhow, Thomas Jefferson today would say it's 49 degrees. It's overcast. It's soggy out. It was raining earlier. It may rain again. I would guess the barometric pressure is lower because of the characteristics I described, but I haven't done that with any equipment. Trying to be a little overly specific this time, having raised Thomas Jefferson with such specificity himself. So, what is going on? Well, we have some high-level craziness. Now, putting it in context, here we have Trump in South Carolina at a rally saying he would incite Russia to attack NATO if NATO wasn't paying its dues to America. Now, you can expect that NATO has become nervous about our reliability as an ally when a candidate for president of the United States, who basically tried to overthrow the government so that he could steal the election several years ago, is the author of this statement. But they find it hard to relegate it to the dustbin of history, given the force with which Trump seems to get away with everything, and we don't use the tools we have, and we don't demand him to do an accounting for what he's done. And the language, I've heard some people on the air today try to make it sound more sophisticated and so forth. What he said was, let Russia do whatever the hell they want. Let Russia do whatever the hell they want. Is that an American president? Is that someone we heard say that? Is that something you can discard? So we're put on notice that in his autocracy, his foreign policy is going to provide for supplying what Russia wants in terms of hegemony, domination, and power. Now, some of you may have read or experienced Khrushchev. And Khrushchev, it was in 1956 or 57, had a whole group of people from the West present. And at one point, and I had an oratorical contest in which I used this line, and it was that Khrushchev turned his pudgy figure toward America and us, and shaking his arm, swore, "We will bury you." So from that date through Putin, who has that similar dream, we have now a candidate for the U.S. presidency, basically embracing what Khrushchev wants and what Putin wants, and some are still supporting him. How is that possible? How is that possible? Now, another example of demeanor under pressure, done badly in Trump's case. And it was said of Jack Kennedy when they were talking about a hero, they said that he was grace under pressure. Trump lacks grace. Trump is a criminal, a wannabe mobster. He literally throws his weight around that grows every day. And he has no problem with that. So he's running against Nikki Haley. And so he says, where's her husband? Well, her husband He is deployed. He's with the South Carolina National Guard, and he's actually on service. But if you want to ask a question, why not say, hey, Donnie, where's your wife, Melania? Huh? Where is she? Is she going to stay with you if you lose the election? Or excuse me, when you lose the election? Where is she? Now, and also in international affairs, we have Netanyahu, who is one of the smoothest persons you'd ever want to have on your team. Now, but what is the subject matter? Well, it's another one of these complex stories, but it reduces to this. Biden said that what happened with the Hamas in Gaza was over the top. So on the talking heads today, they said, so Netanyahu, was it over the top? And he said, I haven't had a chance to talk to him since, but we'll have to go over that. He's very diplomatic. And he did say something else that was interesting, which was, he was asked, when you deal with Biden, how do you find him? And he said, I find him just fine. You know, we've had lots of conversations, particularly because of the attack by Hamas. So we have that. So it's like two pieces of what's going on. We have Trump attacking the absence of Nikki's husband when his wife is nowhere to be seen. The former First Lady, she who would be First Lady again, unless she passed forward in her life. I mean, well, okay, so we see that that's what it is. When I was younger, they had cereal boxes. You know, there were like 8 different kinds, so that your child would not get bored. How many ways can you have sugar flakes, huh? But anyhow, now there are some who want an 8 box of candidates. But we have to get it straight. There are 2 candidates. They are what they are. They are who they are. And we better figure out who we want. And obviously I'm subscribing that you want Biden. Does Biden miss a word? Yeah. Does he have trouble remembering things? Yeah. And I've heard commentators, while discussing this, themselves get lost in their own statement because it happens. It happens at every age. But because of a bias against the aged, I mean everybody, America is not very kind to those who are older. Families with old traditions, different story. The best of America, different story. The best of government, different story. But we just love to make fun of the aged. We think that's just fine. That's okay. And we do it all the time. But let's figure this out. These 2 guys are a little older, and they are going to miss beats. And the question is, are they in touch with reality? Are they multitasking? Are they doing the kinds of jobs that very few other people could do? And the answer is that they are exceptional. Now, when I say this about Trump, do not for a moment think I'm supporting Trump. But what I'm supporting is the notion that we have to be smart, that we don't have an 8 box of cereal. We have 2 living, breathing people who have strengths and weaknesses. And the strongest weakness of Trump is he's a corrupt and evil individual. And the best of Biden is he's the guy, when you say, let George do it, he jumps forward and does it, and has done it. And he's been doing it for his whole life, practically. And he's done it despite losing members of his family at different times, crucial times. And now they would attack him, thinking he's not competent on some level, because on October 7th or 8th, when he was interviewed in this investigation of some materials found at his place, he missed a beat. That's the same day that Hamas attacked Israel. Now, Israel is very important in American politics. Whatever you think about the positions taken, Israel is a big deal, because we live with two things that seem to have been used most frequently against Jews. One, they're Jewish. Two, they are intellectual. Now, intellectual in America is being used against everybody. It is being used against anyone who has an education past high school. And it's because the polls seem to indicate that Trump does well with uneducated. We have to deal with that as a nation, for sure, but we're not going to deal with it between now and November. So we have to smarten up and figure that there are two people running for office and who is best for America. And you know, if it's an exercise in logic, reason, experience, and evidence, it's Biden all the way. If you want a man without character who's been indicted repeatedly, and they would have you believe every one is some sort of conspiracy, and they're identifying that his money is stolen, and they identify that he attacks women and pays a handsome sum for having done so. So that's it. We have two contenders, and we have to see what that is. Now, while this is going on, Congress is fiddling. Now, this also follows up on the Russian thing. In the last several days, there have been 45 drone attacks while we fiddle about what funds we're going to give to the Ukraine and what we're going to do by way of support for Israel and what we're going to do at the border. This is a country that is barely open. The Senate had to work this weekend. Now, I know Schumer. I was once his counsel on the House side, and that's what he would do. He's a workaholic, and to our benefit. But he's trying to get the Senate to take care of business, knowing the House has an even crazier bunch of Republicans who think it's better to do nothing of the most significant problems facing our country right now. Isn't that something? There's a story somewhat off the beat of these things I'm mentioning that I find interesting. And I think it's a tragedy that we don't formalize how we can do this. It's a death with dignity question, which is, well, my favorite Roman senator, you've heard me reference Seneca before. Seneca said that life is not so terrible because at any point you can take an exit. And in fact, he was working for Nero, who did not appreciate his legal skills. And in Nero's kind of crazy period, he asked Seneca to kill himself, commit suicide. And he did. Such an obedient counsel. So there is a tradition of this. Okay, so what does this have to do with? Well, the former Dutch Prime Minister and his wife, they had a hand-in-hand experience of euthanasia. In other words, they agreed at 93 years of age, and both ill, that they should die together. They've been together 70 years, and they didn't want to go on without each other, and they had these problems. Now, we treat this as a crime. Why? Now, should we willy-nilly open the doors and say anybody wants to commit suicide? There are probably ways to do this. Oregon had a death with dignity bill, but the truth is you have no dignity by the time you can exercise this remedy to, without committing a crime, to die, to choose to die at a certain time. So I mentioned that. Now, there's one other thought I have about her, who was the prosecutor who looked at Biden's handling of books or records, documents, classified, and not very responsibly maintaining and returning them. Okay, we can see why that would happen. It's another to keep them, to lie about them, and so on and so forth. But who is the guy appointed by Garland? The fellow who would never be mistakenly compared with Bobby Kennedy when he was Attorney General. Garland appointed a guy who is a Republican, who clerked for Rehnquist on the Supreme Court, who worked with Rosenstein, who was the one, in my opinion, that created the defense for Trump, and then mishandled the Mueller report so that it caused no difficulty for Trump. And he becomes the fella who investigates Hunter Biden, appointed such by Garland, that inert mass that occupies the room that once housed the energy and fire of Bobby Kennedy. And I've been in that room and at that desk and so forth. And it's real. Unfortunately, so is Garland. So you have to look with, a trained eye at anything probably that happens this year. And in that regard, I think the worst they can say about Biden is he had some documents. He shouldn't have had them. He didn't apparently mean to steal them. He didn't pay attention enough. They were brought to his attention and he told the government he had them. Different story than Trump. But we're comparing apples and orangutans when we compare those two. So, I am here in my cathedral of trees. And I think, even though it's only 49 degrees, I can taste the spring. And the two times of the year that are especially dramatic are when we have our fall. But the other is when we have the spring and things come to life and surround us and we hear more birds and we see more animals. And so in my cathedral of trees soon, that's where we'll be. So thanks for joining me. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.